Okay, the spoilers for the new pack are finally up on Card Game DB. If you're paying very close attention, you would have noticed in one of my videos last week, I had a tab open that said City of Secret spoilers. They were spoiled on Imgur from the cards are all in like French or something, so some store in Europe put up the spoilers, but I waited for the official ones on Card Game DB. It makes things easier. So let's get right into the cards of this pack. A City Besieged. This is the new city plot. 2825. When revealed, choose and kneel a location. Up to 2 locations instead if there's a city plot in your use pile. This looks bad, to put it simply. 2 gold is way too little, and the ability has way too high of a chance to be irrelevant. It could be really good in very specific situations, but even in the case where you want to like kneel Starfall, let's say, it's arguable whether it's worth it to be on 2 gold in exchange for kneeling Starfall. Like, that's still a pretty bad trade-off. And then there's going to be a lot of games where this ability does absolutely nothing. So this is not a good plot, in my opinion. I don't expect it to see any play. The 2 gold is the killer. Like, just give it 4 gold maybe, and people might play it only for the stats. But I think the way it is, you wouldn't ever really play this. Like, if you wanted a plot that looks like this, um, I don't know. Yeah, it's bad. End of that card. Alanis Greyjoy. We finally have a new version of her. So she is a loyal 5-cost lady for Greyjoy with the intrigue and power. Reaction: after a Greyjoy location enters play under your control, draw 1 card. Limit once per phase. Um, maybe she can have maybe she can be like a one of in some Greyjoy decks. She's definitely not anything special, but a reasonable body that has pretty reliable card draw. I mean, it's decent enough, but just compare this card to like the core set Littlefinger. Just whenever he enters play, draw 2. And this card is fairly similar. It's not that much like better or worse. So I would rate her as playable, but not great. Arrogant Contender. This is a card from first edition that's finally being reprinted. So this passive ability here, this used to be a keyword in first edition called Melee. I believe the Marjorie Tyrell from the House of Thorns box has the same ability, and was also sort of a reprint of a first edition version. So we have Knight, 5/4, these 2 icons. Reaction: after you win a challenge in which he's attacking alone, he gains 1 power for each defending character to a maximum of 3 power. So yeah, this card looks bad. I can't remember if they've changed it any from first edition. I seem to recall it being decent in first edition, but I don't really know. But I don't expect this card to see any play. 5 is expensive. It's like the reaction of gaining power is just like a bad version of Renown. It's just not really accomplishing much of anything. Like, what are you doing playing this card? Just play cheaper, more efficient knights, I guess, and then play like Tourney for the King or something. Like, just play Knight of Summer. Like, compare this to Knight of Summer, which is like 4 for 5 with printed Renown. This is 5 for 4 with like a really crappy wannabe attempt at Renown. Because people are just going to not defend it, and he's not going to get any power. And then even if he does gain power, it's often going to go away because he's non-unique, so he's going to die to Valar Morghulis, and he costs 5, so he's going to make it a lot more difficult for Valar Dohaeris. Like, it's going to be awkward to keep this guy around through a Dohaeris. So yeah, not a good card. Black Market Merchant. 2-cost Shadow character for Targaryen, 1 strength, intrigue, power, and Shadow 2. So after Black Market Merchant comes out of Shadows, search the top 10 cards of your deck for an attachment with printed cost 3 or lower, and attach it to an eligible character you control. Shuffle your deck. So definitely a good card for Qohor, because it's just like straight card advantage in Qohor. And like the Daenerys Voltron deck, obviously you played in that deck. I don't know about other decks. I think it's still, because it's non-loyal, I think there's a high chance it could be used in like Queensguard decks. So let's say you're playing Tyrell Banner of the Dragon, and you just play like 2 Queensguards and 1 Seal of the Hand, and then you slap 3 of these in there. and it just makes it that much more reliable to get your Queen's Guard into play. Because this way you're paying 4, you get the Queen's Guard into play for free, so you're only paying 1 more than just paying for the Queen's Guard normally. You get a chump character and its card advantage because you pulled the Queen's Guard out of your deck. It didn't come from your hand or anything, so it's like you drew a card. So that's a really good play. So I expect this card to see play in those decks. Ghost of High Heart, Ally and Brotherhood. And man, does she look ugly. Like, oh, look at what, she looks like a skeleton in this art. I don't know what the deal is with that. While you control no loyal characters, each character you control gets +1 strength. And then the ability is the real rub here. Kneel Ghost of High Heart to look at a player's hand, choose and discard 1 from that hand, then that player draws 1 card. So this would be, I don't know, this is a potentially useful ability. The problem is it's just too expensive. So paying 3 and you have to kneel the character for that ability is probably not going to be worth it. It's just a little too expensive. I think if she even costs 2 gold instead of 3, she might be playable. But 3 as a neutral, she can't be reduced by, like, you know, your Hearttree Grove or whatever. And you're not actually getting card advantage. If it was just look at the opponent's hand and discard 1 period, this would be way stronger. But discard 1 and then they draw 1, you're not actually making them lose cards overall. So there's a chance you're going to see their hand and they're not going to have anything that's like super important. Or potentially you'll see their hand and they won't have anything super great, and then you'll pick 1 and discard because you're using the ability, so you have to, and then they'll draw something that was better than what they had off of the Ghost's ability. So I don't think this card really is going to be quite good enough to see play. Again, it's like barely on the margin of being playable, but it's not quite there. Knights of the Hollow Hill. This is a reprint agenda from the first edition. This was the agenda for slow control decks in first edition. And man, do I still have nightmares about trying to play against frickin' Martell and Targaryen with this agenda. Boy, were those some not very enjoyable games. You want to talk about lame decks that literally sit there and do nothing. It was worse in first edition. So you have no setup, and you can't get any gold bonus from other cards. Like, you can't play Rose Roads. I mean, you can, but they're dead cards. But you get +3 gold, +2 initiative, and +1 reserve. So one nice thing about this is I think this is worse than the first edition version of the agenda. In first edition, it only gave +2 gold, but it gave +2 influence, which was a secondary resource that does not exist in this version of the game, that existed in first edition. And influence would be used to pay for really powerful effects that basically, you know, could not be played otherwise without playing influence cards. So for example, in first edition, the core set Varys effect was instead an event called Westeros Bleeds, which could be played by kneeling 4 influence. So people would play this agenda and they already have 2 influence in play from the start of the game. And they only need like 1 influence location and then they can play Westeros Bleeds, which was extremely obnoxious. It was considerably better than the core set Varys of this version of the game, because it was an event, so it could just come out and do it. The core set Varys in this version of the game is much more difficult to use as a reset. I don't know if this agenda will actually see play. It's obviously for the slow reactive control decks because it naturally, I mean, it's just, you get no setup, but you get a big gold bonus. So it's always going to lend itself to having more of an advantage over a longer game as opposed to a shorter one. But there's more competition in terms of other good agendas to play for those types of decks. Like, I think the Shadows agendas, either Banners or Assault from the Shadows, have really shown that they have merit as agendas for control decks. Wars to Come is an option, although it is considerably weaker now that it's on the restricted list, but still it's an option. Even Fealty is like not unreasonable, because with Fealty you actually get set up and you basically still get +1 gold off your Fealty ability. So this way you're getting like +2 gold over Fealty, but you lose your setup. So the game has to last 5 turns before Knights of the Hollow Hill will have generated more gold for you than Fealty did. And it's pretty arguable which one of those is going to be better. Yeah, I don't know. We'll just see. I do not look forward to it if this ends up being a good agenda and people start like spamming Martel Hollow Hill becomes a thing. I really don't want to see that happen, so hopefully it's bad. Night Flyer, we have a new Greyjoy warship here. Little 1-cost Shadow with Shadow X. After Night Flyer comes out of Shadows, choose a location with printing cost X or lower and discard it from play. This seems extremely good because it does not even say non-limited. You can just use this to discard the opponent's economy. So the worst case scenario for this card, you just bring it out of Shadows for 0 and it discards a Rose Road and you get a warship for your warship garbage. And it doesn't kneel, dude. It's just a reaction to coming out of Shadows. You don't have to kneel it or anything, so you can kneel it for like Victarion also. So very efficient already. And then it's so good as an answer to all kinds of obnoxious locations because you can just do it. You don't have to worry about anything. You can just bring it out, pay 2, get rid of that annoying Old Town or Chamber of the Painted Table, pay 1, get rid of Flea Bottom, pay 1, get rid of Astapor. That's obviously going to be like a game-winning play. So it seems like a really strong card. I think this will see a lot of play. I mean, the ability to just come out of Shadows and discard a location, just basically unconditional. It takes me back. It's back like the Newly Made Lord, but it's a little less awkward than the Newly Made Lord. I don't know if that's a good way to explain it. No Surprises, a new Loyal Stark event, cost 1. Reveal your hand, then until the end of the phase, each opponent cannot play events or bring cards out of Shadows. It's an anti-Shadows card, it's that simple. So if you go up against a deck where they like put 9 cards into Shadows, then you just play this on their trade routes turn, they're not going to be very happy. But that's like the only situation where this card is good. I don't think it'll see much play because it's too specific overall. If it does see play, it'll be basically a tech card because there's too many Shadow decks. Owen the Oath. We have a new Night's Watch Steward character, 4 for 4 intrigue. While he's participating in a challenge, each character with more than 1 icon does not contribute strength to the challenge. This is a reasonable steward for a steward's deck. I don't think it's reasonable enough to just put in Night's Watch decks in general. Maybe you could put it as 1 copy in a core set wall deck because this actually has a lot of potential as a defensive ability. Yeah, so one interesting thing with this guy is I think you can give him a Practice Blade and then he will never contribute his strength, but he can also defend military. So that way you have 2 potential challenge types that you can throw him into, and he will nuke all of the opponent's challenge strength unless they have single icon characters, which is very possible that they won't have. And then, you know, if you don't have to put the Practice Blade on him if that's not going to be useful, but it could potentially be good in like a core set wall deck to do that. So I think he's definitely a one of in like a Steward's deck, and he might be a one of in like a core set wall deck. Or even like Builders, you might run one of him because that's a deck where you use Practice Blades. And you want to play very defensively. Pyromancer's Cache, Lannister Loyal Attachment. Location only. Treat attached location as if its printed text box were blank. Attached location gains action. Kneel this location to draw 1 card. This is a bad version of Frozen Solid. Very unfortunate. It would be cool for Lannister to get some good location control, but I don't think this really does it. Giving the opponent the ability to draw cards in exchange for blanking the location is probably too big of a trade-off. Probably just not worth it. It's that simple. Because, I mean, like, you nullified their location, sure, but they're going to get card advantage off of this. They're going to draw more cards to then play. So they're going to basically be replacing whatever location you blanked with more cards that they were able to draw. So it's not that effective, really. Shadow of the East, Targaryen Loyal Shadow Event, Shadow 0. Action, choose an attachment and discard it from play. If there's a summer plot revealed, return Shadow of the East to your hand instead of placing it in your discard. So, I don't know about this. First, it compares badly to Karth. Karth is just better if you only need attachment control to remove milks. Karth is better. This is a card that can discard attachments off of the opponent's side. That's probably not going to be reliable enough to be worth using this card. You would only play this again in a situation where like Cohort Voltron decks and like Queensguard decks is something that's all over the place. If you're expecting to run into a bunch of Queensguard, this is sort of like a counter card to that. But for just playing the game in general, I think there's too many matchups where this is either doesn't do anything at all or is just plain worse than Karth. Red Keep Gowler, just a Baratheon Shadow character, 4/4, 2 icons. Shadow 4, so way too expensive to actually bring it out of Shadows normally, but action, move 2 power from your faction card to a Baratheon character, so put this into play from Shadows. Which is totally reasonable. I mean, you can imagine just moving 2 power onto your Robert Baratheon or Stannis Baratheon, so put this guy into play, and then he's a 2/4. So, or if you're playing Assault from the Shadows and you kneel your faction card, he's a 0/4. And then he becomes really good. So definitely a possibility for Baratheon Shadows decks. I don't know if he really makes the cut in a non-Shadows Baratheon deck, but I think he's still playable even then. Like, this ability is not unreasonable. Doing this action to get a 2/4 with these icons is totally like playable. It's not bad. So yeah, he's okay. Shadow of the South, Martell Shadow event. Shadow 1, action, choose a character until the end of the phase. That character loses a challenge icon of your choice. If there is a scheme revealed, return Shadow of the South to your hand instead of placing it in the discard. So I think this is too expensive and slow to really justify. Compare it to Dornish Spy, it's so much worse. Dornish Spy, you only pay 1 more gold, and you actually get a 3-strength character with 2 icons, which is way better. And this, you have to pay 3 every time you use it. And you have to build around it with your plot deck by playing scheme plots. It's just too slow and too many requirements and too expensive. Maybe if you're going to play like Assault from the Shadows, then you can be playing this for 1 gold. But even then, it's only worth it if you're playing a bunch of scheme plots so that you can bring it back to your hand and use it over and over. And like, is it really acceptable to play 5 or 6 scheme plots? It's probably not. So that's really a limiting factor of this card. If this had some type of more reasonable condition for returning it to your hand, maybe if you have lost a challenge this phase, return it to your hand, then it would be a lot more playable, I think, at least in an Assault deck. But right now, I don't think it makes the cut, even in Assault from the Shadows. Shadow of the Wall, the Night's Watch Shadow event. Shadow 0, choose and stand a character with 1 or few challenge icons. If there's a winner plot card revealed, weird they gave winner to this and not to Stark. I wonder if the Stark condition is going to be if every character you control has the Stark affiliation. I hope not. Because that's so unbalanced when like you're making people play winter plots or scheme plots. That's so much worse than, every character have your faction affiliation, which is an extremely easy condition to fulfill. Anyways, if there's a winter plot card reveal, return it to your hand instead of placing it in your discard. I don't think this will see any play. Standing a character to begin with, just pay 2 to stand a character, is not really good enough to be playable in the first place in Night's Watch. And then the fact that it has to be 1 challenge icon makes it unplayable, because if you were ever going to play a stand event like this, you would use it to stand, for example, the 3 icon version of Jon Snow. But you can't stand him because they have to have 1 or few icons, so this is not worth playing. Like, it's anti-synergy because choosing and standing a character with only 1 icon is way less effective. They only have 1 icon. The odds are way higher that they're not going to be able to do 2 challenges that matter when they only have 1 icon. So it's like sort of a self-defeating condition. Shadow Politics, a Shadow event, Shadow 1, so you have to basically pay 3. Action, choose 1, choose and discard 1 from Shadows. Choose up to 5 cards in a discard pile and remove them from the game, or look in an opponent's hand. So again, this is just an anti-Shadows card. And even then, I don't know if it makes the cut. Paying 3 to discard a card from Shadows, it's a bit expensive. Yeah, only we'll see play if Shadows is a big deal, and even then, I think it's not efficient enough just paying 3 to discard 1. I mean, think about False Plans, which is only 1 gold to discard a card basically at random, which is sort of what you're doing here if you use the first ability. That only costs 1, and it still doesn't see any play. This costs 3, is only relevance against Shadows, so it's considerably worse, and False Plans doesn't get used. So we have Show of Strength, Loyalty Relevant, 2 cost, challenge action. Until the end of the phase, treat each character with strength 2 or lower, 3 or lower, as if the text box was blank. Again, this is too specific. The odds that this is a dead card are too high, because it's going to be quite often that there are no characters in play with relevant text boxes with strength 3 or lower, and then you're going to be like, why do I have this card in my deck? So probably not ever going to be played. Small John Umber, 4 cost, 6 strength renown with 2 icons, but he gets -1 strength for each plot card in your used pile. I think this is a very playable card. Stark has so many good efficient characters already, I don't know if this guy makes the cut. But probably in like a Stark Crossing deck, you definitely use this, right? Because you're trying to rush. This is a really good card for a rush deck. I don't know if he quite makes the cut in other decks. Just because his stats are actually pretty decent. I mean, he's only going to have, how many plots do you have to reveal? So on turn 1, he's 6, 2 is 5, 3 is 4, turn 4. So I guess he can go down to 1 strength on the last plot, and then the plot deck will reset and he's back to 6. So yeah, I guess if you top deck him and on like turn 4 or 5, he's really bad. So it's possible that he'll be a bad card. I don't know if it's really worth risking. I think it's a card for crossing, and you don't quite use it anywhere else. The Black Cells, this a reprint. Baratheon location, Shadow 2. Reaction after a card you control comes out of Shadows. Kneel the Black Cells to choose an opponent's character. Until the end of the phase, that character cannot kneel or stand. Alright, so this is how do you say? This is the card that will make a Baratheon Shadows deck run. And I believe in first edition, this was the card that made a Baratheon Shadows deck run. Because you get one of these out there, and it's non-unique. Oh no, it is unique. Why did I think it was non-unique? Regardless, it's still strong. You get this out there, and like, let's say you're playing Assault from the Shadows, and then this is like every turn, you're going to be able to trigger this to choose a character that they basically can't use at all for the turn. And I think it's stronger than Melisandre, because the core set Melisandre will just kneel a character, but if they have a stand ability, like if it's Victarion Greyjoy, he can just stand back up. But if you use this on Victarion Greyjoy, the 7-cost version, he can't do anything, because cannot kneel means literally cannot even be declared as an attacker or defender, so he becomes a totally dead card. The only way to get around this effect is cards that just don't kneel to attack to begin with, like Jaime Lannister. So yeah, that makes it a very strong effect. It's like, core set Melisandre, but considerably more efficient if you can power it. It only costs 2. It's a location, so it's safer. It's like safe from milk, and it's probably a little bit more of a reliable trigger if you're playing Assault. So this is a good card for Baratheon Shadows. If there's a Baratheon Shadows deck, this will be like the card that makes you want to play it. The Fowler Twins, Martell card, 3 cost, 2 strength, 2 icons. Action, choose a character. That character must be declared as an attacker or defender in the next challenge initiated this phase, if able. Limit once per phase. I think this is a very playable card. I think you could stick this as a one-of in plenty of Martell or Banner Sun decks. Because you don't have to kneel them to use the ability, which makes a big difference. If you had to kneel these to use it, then it wouldn't be playable. But it's just like a card that can also give you a challenge advantage. There's a lot of ways you can imagine to make this a useful ability. Especially with Martell, if you have this on the board, they're not going to want to make you first player, because this is sort of like a pseudo-intimidate ability. So that'll give them a hard choice between, are you going to make Martell second, which they probably want to be anyways, or are you going to make them first and let them leverage this ability more effectively? I think this is a very reasonable card. And then we have the Regent's Guard, the Lannister shadow character. Yeah, 4, 2 icons like usual. Shadow 4. Action, return a Lannister non-ally character with printed cost 4 or higher to your hand to put the Regent's Guard into play from Shadows. This is weird. It has to cost 4 or higher, and it has to be non-ally. Non-ally, like why does it say non-ally? Anyways, this makes I'm really not sure about this card, and I lean towards it not being good because, you know, what if you just don't have any cards with printed cost 4 or higher that you're okay with returning to your hand? I mean, you're not going to send back like Tyrion or Tywin or anything like that. So what do you do to put this into play? I can't even think of that many characters that are worth sending back for this. Yeah, I think it's just too difficult to really fulfill this condition. I don't think it's worth it. If it was maybe like printed cost 3 or higher, maybe it would be more playable. But I don't think this is really good enough the way that it is. It's going to be just too awkward to make this ability work. So yeah, that is the whole pack. So thoughts on the whole pack? I don't know. Yeah, we got some decent cards. We got some playable cards. And we didn't get anything that seems too ridiculous. So I think this is a pretty good pack overall. Hopefully Knights of the Hollow Hill will not be too stupid. But I think it'll be alright because another thing about this game is like gold and economy is way more available than it was in first edition. So a +2 gold bonus meant a lot more in first edition than it does in this version. In this version of the game, you can play like Late Summer Feast, you can play trade routes, you can play trading with a Pintoshi. There's just like a lot of economy in this game already. You don't necessarily need a gold bonus from your agenda. So we'll see what happens with this. And the +2 initiative, +1 reserve is definitely less relevant than +2 influence from the old version. Hopefully it's bad, we'll find out. So that's the pack. That is the pack.